Okay, and Jakob, I believe we can begin.
Okay, so I just want to welcome you on behalf of GLOBSEC. It gives us extreme pleasure to have another event with Hanns Seidel Stiftung, plus of course to have a seminar with Madam Minister from Bavaria. We have just finished
Jakob,
our annual big event conference here in Bratislava.
I just want to welcome you
next time, next year. It gives us extreme pleasure to be with us here, to have another, hopefully without the pandemic, to discuss all these matters in person. And I think that the subject is more topical than ever because we've been discussing different levels of governance, say state, nation state, European level of governance for many months, if not years. But now we have a context of post-pandemic recovery and certain erosion of trust. I am saying this not as a think tanker, but as a citizen who has been confused. Many times I've been following the news about the pandemic, which vaccine works and which one is safe and what kind of dangers it presents. And even if I try to follow news and reliable sources, even in different languages, I can be forgiven for feeling confused. So what I'm saying is that there is this very physical feeling or need for trust, and this trust should be provided but by different layers of government. There are also other aspects of insecurity which are now on many people's hearts and minds. For example, financial security. Will I lose my job because of a pandemic? What will the recovery look like for my professional outlook, etc.? There is also a question of emotional damage that the lockdowns have created. And of course, a very big question over how the post-pandemic reality will look like in terms of digital revolution, in terms of in terms of the green agenda, which is more and more on the cards, both as regards the action of governments, but also the awareness of citizens. And that brings me to the challenge and also opportunity, which is the cooperation at the level below nation state, between, say, Bavaria and Wielkopolska region or Bratislavski Kraj. I think this is the privilege and big opportunity because this sub-national level of governance is closer to citizens. So it is easier to tell what is on people's minds. Sometimes I feel a little bit surprised that some elites, and I don't want to sound anti-elitist now what I'm saying, but I have an impression that people in Brussels don't understand our problems very well. There is a lot of talk these days about the Conference for Europe, what kind of constitution for Europe we need, etc. And I think to myself that in this post-pandemic reality, people's concerns are a little bit less ambitious and more closer to their lives, be them professional or family or whatever. And this is why such a seminar like this one is very needed, because it brings the debate closer to the everyday concerns instead of remaining at the very big, high meta level. Let me stop here, and once again, thank you very much for accepting the invitation on the part of GLOBSEC, and thank you for having this together with Hanns Seidel Stiftung, and over to you.
Lieber Herr Wiśniewski, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, seien Sie herzlich willkommen.
Mr. Wiśniewski, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome. On behalf of Hanns Seidel Foundation, we're very happy that we, together with GLOBSEC, we are organizing this event. It's a partner. We have had very good cooperation for a number of years in Slovakia. My name is Markus Nehm. I'm the leader of the regional project of Hanns Seidel Foundation in Central Europe, responsible for Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. And I will moderate today's discussion. Before we start this event, I'd like to give you two pieces of information. I'm sure you've noticed already. We have 3 languages today, and when you listen, so you can listen to English, German, or Slovak. You see at the bottom the interpreting function. You see a globe on the right, on the bottom right. You click on the globe and you can choose the language you want to listen to. In course of the event, you will have a chance to ask questions to our speakers. Please do it through the Q&A function. You'll find it also at the bottom, in the middle. As a moderator, I will then read your questions. Please write in German or in English. Now I would like to introduce our guests at the virtual podium. Melanie Hummel, I'd like to specifically welcome her, who is the Minister for European Affairs and International Affairs of the Bavarian state government. She coordinates the European policy of the Free State Bavaria. She has had many years of political activities since 2003. She's been a member of the Bavarian Landtag, the parliament, as well as she's the member of the Bavarian government. Madam Minister, we're very happy that you are participating at our discussion today. Thank you. We would also like to welcome 3 experts from Slovakia at our stage. It is a great honor for us that Mrs. Katarina Cefalvajová is with us today. She is the director of the Institute for Central Europe from Bratislava. She was the member of the Slovak parliament, and Mrs. Cefalvajová, she was the chairwoman of the European Committee, and she advocated pro-European and pro-Atlantic foreign policy of the country. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, gave her a national award, French award. So welcome, Mrs. Cefalvajová. Ivan Miklos, we would like to welcome among us a former deputy prime minister and the former finance minister of Slovakia. Mr. Miklos is as a president is at the top of think tank Meza 10, which deals with the economic issues, social issues, and with education policies. Welcome, Mr. Miklos. Welcome at the Hanns Seidel Foundation. And we also have Mr. Ivan Štefanec, who is the member of European Parliament. Mr. Štefanec is mainly experts in the field of consumer protection and internal market. Mr. Štefanec focuses on the issues of small and medium-sized enterprises. He also he's been active for a number of years in the Association of Small and Medium-Sized Entrepreneurs, and he's a member of EPP. Mr. Štefanec, welcome to our discussion today. Now we will have introductory speeches of our speakers. Madam Minister Melanie Hummel starts. You have the floor, Madam Minister. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me to participate at this event. Sorry, I've spoken so much today already. Okay, excuse me. Maybe my colleagues could go and I'll join you later. No problem. Mrs. Cefalvajová, please, you can start.
Thank you very much. So thank you so much for the introduction, and I would like to start with saying how extremely important I think it is to talk on all levels of governance, on national, regional, and municipal. And therefore, I would like to thank GLOBSEC for this opportunity. I'm very happy to exchange with Madam Minister, and of course, it's always a pleasure to exchange with my Slovak colleagues and friends, Mr. Štefanec and Mr. Miklos. I think we all agree that Europe is having not so easy time at this moment. Pandemic has revealed some truths that we will need to deal with. First of all, the image that the COVID-19 crisis has created is one of a not too well handled situation at the European level, although I would argue that we handled it just as well or just as badly as the United Kingdom, the United States, Israel, or virtually any other country. In any case, it generated a lot of criticism in national media across Europe and beyond. The population has been vulnerable to disinformation, for instance, that China helped some member states more than the EU did, and others, and also to failures of some national governments. Sadly, this is also the case of Slovakia, that has not been able to secure financial support from the EU, which was aimed at helping the hardest hit businesses to the same extent as other member states. So all these factors contributed to blemishing the image of the EU, both on the outside and within, which is, in this case, perhaps even worse. A recent survey by the European Council on Foreign Relations revealed that public faith in EU institutions has declined due to their handling of the pandemic. Interestingly, the biggest decline seems to be in Germany, where people believing that the EU system is broken is 11 percentage points higher than before the pandemic. And these people now form a majority, according to the survey. So Europe now finds itself at a very vulnerable stage, I would say, where times require closer cooperation, or so I am persuaded at least. But people are disappointed, they are skeptical and tired, which is obviously not the best combination. The truth is that mainly smaller member states like Slovakia have hugely benefited from the EU during the COVID crisis. Where would we now be in vaccine procurement, for example, if we had to do it on our own? Probably we would have to rely on China or Russia for most of our vaccines, or still waiting for our first doses of Pfizer, AstraZeneca, or Johnson. And it's not only about the vaccines, but also the recovery plan or other EU members sending us medical staff and equipment when the crisis has hit us the hardest. And these are the aspects that, in my opinion, we need to emphasize together with the benefits of the European integration and cooperation, also during the ongoing conference on the future of Europe. So the first thing that is perhaps not as pressing an issue from a practical point of view, but which I personally find extremely important, and it might even become existential, is the restoring of people's confidence in Europe. And then secondly, from a perhaps more practical point of view, something that I consider one of the most important and defining issues right now in Europe is the recovery plan. So this massive investment that we all agreed to accomplish needs to be viewed not only as a post-pandemic recovery plan that will help us to return to normal, because there is no such thing as going back to normal, but we need to view it as the huge undertaking that it is and use its leverage to transition to the next level economically. I believe that the pandemic is just a part of a wider spectrum of change and challenges that we are facing, issues that we are used to calling challenges of the future, but they are challenges of today, really. Climate change and related green transition, transforming the economy while making sure that we remain competitive, or better yet, while increasing competitiveness, digitalization, resilience building towards new kinds of threats, including cybersecurity and others. So we need to respond to all of these very soon in order to have weight in an increasingly multipolar world. And it translates to national and regional levels as well. The example of Slovakia illustrates it quite well. A fairly successful economic model built on attracting FDI and industry, which has boosted growth and GDP, but it is becoming increasingly exhausted, and we need to level up. We need heavy investment in research and development and digitalization, together with supporting an economic transition to a model that is low carbon and green, but at the same time does not kill our businesses. And the recovery plan, in my opinion, is a unique opportunity to kickstart the process. It will be hard, and we will need everybody on board. We will need to rely heavily on European and regional cooperation and all this, but it is an opportunity that we cannot afford to let pass. And of course, clearly we have more pressing issues at hand, like increasing the vaccine rollout or preparing for the next wave of the pandemic in a way that will limit damages to human lives and to the economy. But I believe that these two issues are perhaps equally important, and they are very important also from the international and European cooperation point of view, not only on the national level, but on all of the level of governance. And we will fail if we do not really put all our forces in it. So perhaps that would be my initial remarks to kickstart the conversation.
Haben Sie herzlichen Dank, Frau Cefalvajova.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cefalvajova. Sie haben über die Diskrepanz gesprochen zwischen das, was die Menschen über die you talked about the discrepancy between the EU, the trust, and the institutions, and this is actually a problem which deals with a number of issues. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Hummel, the Bavarian Minister for EU Affairs. You have the floor, Minister. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that I can be here with you today. This is this online platform of GLOBSEC and Hanns Seidel Foundation. I believe this is an important topic where, when we think about Corona, the numbers are going down, vaccinations, well, we need to be careful now. We need to make sure that the people will be willing to get the vaccines. We have a feeling at the moment, well, we can do a lot of things. So we got some freedoms back, and some people even think maybe I don't need the second shot anymore. But this is very important for Europe in order to have the pandemic under control, so that the people get the vaccines. But when we have a look at Bavaria, in the EU, we are in the heart of the European Union, and we see that our connection to the countries of Central Europe, Eastern and Southern Europe is important to us. And not only in the pandemic, but also after the pandemic. When we have a look at the transport flows, we see ourselves as a bridge between East and West. And when we think about pandemic, and I took this office in January, and well, I believe this will be important after the pandemic. And my colleague has already spoken about this trust in the EU. And obviously, there were questions whether the vaccines came fast enough. Is it sufficient? We see now we're getting additional vaccines, and it's actually good that we did it together as the EU community. We were able to procure these vaccines, and I believe this was the right step. Maybe it would have been better if it was done faster at the beginning, but we can learn from these processes. We can learn that even in the EU, some decision-making processes could be improved to make faster decisions. In January, when I took this office, I was thinking about what is important after the pandemic. So what was already said, the trust, and this entails also a discussion with the citizens about the future of Europe, to discuss about future of Europe and to take citizens on board. And it also means that within Europe, we need to have a look at the pandemic, maybe, what are the new gaps which came into being? What are the new issues? For instance, border controls at our borders between Bavaria and Czech Republic. We had to introduce these border checks. Well, this was not easy. Maybe some people were even thinking about the Iron Curtain, about the old times. And now it's important that we that in these times we make sure that we have good relationships with Central and Eastern Europe. Maybe some countries used some other vaccines from other sources. That's also a question that needs to be discussed in the EU. So this is the first pillar, which is important for me. That's the trust between the EU member states, but also the trust between the EU citizens. Secondly, economic relationships. What I mean by this? Well, people still have fears. They're afraid of their health. And they experienced it in the past months, but they also fear about their jobs. And we need to make sure that the economic relations which functioned normally, they were interrupted. People were not able to meet, people could not travel, and economic partnerships were not developed as we had done it in normal times. So I believe it's important that in the field of economy, jobs, trade relations, as a second pillar, we need to strengthen them. What helps is the EU recovery plan, but obviously we need to include digitalization, and the third pillar is the question of sustainability and climate protection. Since we all focused on the pandemic for a long time, but this issue remains, and I would say that even in the EU Green Deal, we have a Green Deal, and in July, when we hear specific new proposals after the pandemic, we will invest money within the recovery plan, and therefore it's important to have a good cooperation in this field. Another issue which is important for me and for Bavaria is that with the partners from other countries that we act on equal footing to be a responsible partner. As a Europe, we are in global competition, and sometimes I have a feeling that within Europe we are competing against each other. Well, sometimes competition is necessary and good, but we should not focus too much on competition within EU, but we should rather focus on competition, on the global competition as an EU, and to play a pioneer role, which we can have in some area in the field of climate, technology, and so on, so that we take advantage of it, because it will be extremely important in the future, and we need to make sure what the pandemic showed us. Where is Europe? Where is Europe suffered from a pandemic? And we will talk about this in the upcoming weeks and months. And therefore, I'm very happy I can be in this discussion with you. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. The word trust plays an important role in each of your presentations. And that's also important that the EU member states act together and achieve progress together. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Miklos, who is our next speaker. Mr. Miklos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to this interesting discussion. Let me mention what I see as most important lessons from this COVID crisis and post-COVID perspectives in EU, and particularly in Central European countries. First, I think it is clear now that what we need for future, to be better prepared also for facing these kind of challenges, is on one side better and more coordination on the European Union level and even on the global level, if we are speaking about global problems like pandemic. But on the other side, what we need is also much better competency and professionalism and responsibility also on the regional and local level. And I think the COVID crisis showed it very clearly, at least if you're speaking about our Slovakian experience. As Katarina also mentioned, on the national level, crisis was not managed very well by Slovakian government, especially if you're speaking about second wave of the COVID crisis. And we have seen that what was missing was also better and more and closer even coordination on the EU level and global level. But in Slovakian case, especially, it was the insufficient maybe incorporation of the local and regional self-government, because we have seen that when these institutions and these levels have been involved in the process, it started to work much better. Because really the more concrete information are there, and also more direct contact with the people. In Slovakian case, especially if you are speaking about testing or about vaccination, the involvement of the regional and local self-governments improved situation really significantly. Which means this is, in my opinion, also showing that not only in this area, but in general, what we will need in better managing the societies will be to kind of moving in two directions from the national level. On one side, on the above, which means to the European Union and global level, and on other side to give more competencies and responsibilities and also possibilities to manage things to the regional and local level. Second lesson, in my opinion, very important, is that this crisis showed that it is divergence as consequence of the COVID crisis. It will be divergence between or among the countries and also inside of the countries. Regarding European Union, I think it is a very important question, because what is a lesson from the past is that these countries which had responsible economic policy, these countries which did reforms before, these countries which had good public finance, sound public finance, these countries had much more money and also tools for managing the crisis, for instance, compensating the lack of income for those who have been affected by the crisis. On the other side, countries which have been less responsible and less reform-oriented had much less possibilities and tools for managing with the crisis. Another lesson is, and this will be, I think, maybe decisive also inside the Eurozone area, that what is threatening, and I am afraid that COVID crisis and post-COVID reality will even speeding up the process. What is a real threat for the unity of European Union, and especially for the unity of Eurozone, is divergence in competitiveness divergence. That's the reason, also one of the reasons why a recovery plan was created, to help countries to speeding up necessary reforms, not only in connection with digitization and with green economy, but also to be more competitive in the global competition. We will only see. We don't know now how it will work. Of course, it is very good if we have additional, national governments have additional money, if there is kind of framework which will also help these countries to do economic reforms like European Commission is doing, but it is very unclear to say what will be real result. In my opinion, it will be very important, because if those countries who have been lagging behind in their competitiveness even until now will not do necessary more reforms than other countries, and especially question about North and South of Eurozone and European Union, then it could be under threat. It could be a sustainability of the Eurozone. And last lesson which I would like to mention is specifically about Central European countries. If you are speaking especially about, Visegrad 4 countries or these kind of countries, we can see also another new challenge or potential problem, and it is a threat of. It is firstly there is kind of double trap. One is middle income trap, which means necessity to restructuring economy from the mass industrial production to economy driven by innovation. innovation-driven economy, for which necessary structural reforms have to be done. And second is threat of illiberal democracy, which we can see not in all countries, fortunately, but at least in 2 Visegrad countries, Hungary and partially also in Poland. This will be very important, because how to deal with this, because it is again also about trust, and the lack of trust is one of the reasons why political parties which are stressing or trying to limiting the liberal democracy are becoming more and more popular, not only in this part of Europe, but also in other countries, which means I think we have a lot of challenges, and the COVID crisis and post-COVID reality was only speeding up the process of these problems, tensions, and challenges, and it will be very, very important, not only on the national level, but also in the regional level and on the European level, how we will face these challenges. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Miklos, für Ihren
Thank you very
Beitrag.
much, Mr. Miklos, for your speech. You mentioned some interesting aspects. You also spoke about some problems where the local level should have more responsibility, which is probably a point which we could discuss later on. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Štefanec, who is the member of European Parliament. Mr. Štefanec, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam Minister, dear Katarina, dear Ivan, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm really very pleased to be with you. All of you had a very good remarks about pandemic. So let me highlight 3 points. First one is that also we shouldn't forget that we still address the fight against pandemic by common European approach. It's a matter of fact that beginning was a little bit slow because there were competencies in the healthcare area on the national level, but it's the matter of fact that the common research for vaccine and common approach is the crucial in fight against pandemic. And I think people understand that. My dear colleague Katarina mentioned one research on one survey in terms of foreign policy, which was also very important. But let me highlight also the result of last Eurobarometer survey, according to which healthcare and economical area, job creation area, there are 2 areas in which Europeans see more need for cooperation. They need, they see more need for our integration in terms of healthcare system. And it is not surprise because of pandemic, and also in terms of economical cooperation. I think most people do understand that we can overcome pandemic only by a common approach. And this is very important fact that even later, but the crucial fact is our common European approach. And this is not only in terms of fight against pandemic, this is also in terms of economical recovery. And the package which was put together on the European level, I mean, recovery and resilience facility, it is really the unique package of money. And I think it's a very, very important challenge for national governments, but also for European institutions to use it in the right way, because this chance will not be repeated. This is the unique chance how to utilize these investments for economical recovery. Second point I'd like to mention, as everybody touched this point, it is about trust. I think to have better trust, to increase trust for citizens into our European common approach, we have to talk common language, we have to have common objectives, first of all, and we have to have common management to achieve these objectives. If we have the objective like to be first carbon neutral economy by 2050, or to have to be digital leader, I think we have to have not only common language, but we have to have common practices and common management how to achieve that. And these objectives must be the same on the European and national level as well. The third point I'd like to mention is the change, because definitely nowadays we want to remove all the barriers on the single market, which unfortunately still exists, but we cannot come back to the business as usual. Everybody has to change. Many businesses changed procedures. Many schools changed educational procedures. I think almost everybody changed. Even politicians changed how they deal the methods, how they communicate with citizens. They use more digital technologies. So we have to understand the fact that we cannot come back to the normal situation like before pandemic, but we have to change ourselves. We have new technologies, particularly digital technologies, which we can utilize for the improvement of life of our citizens. And I'd like to highlight here particularly important point, and this is the role of SMEs. SMEs, they have a very difficult situation right now. Roughly 50% of them, they face bankruptcies because many of them, they could not do business during pandemic. And this quite difficult situation is also reflected now in the whole economy. We can see some inflation pressure. And also what we can see is the lack of deliveries for industry, which is reflected, for example, in automotive industry right now, because many SMEs have already bankrupted. So situation is not easy, and we have to help them not only in terms of improvement to the access to capital, but also to improve the access to skills. But last but not least, to help them by completing single market. I understand that during pandemic, many countries protected its territory by putting some barriers on the market or on the border. But I think we have to be very clear that we want to come back to single market. And not only that, we have to complete single market, particularly in the area of services. This will be not important only for SMEs, but for everybody. And at the end, it will be beneficial for European citizens. Thank you.
Ihnen gilt ein Dankeschön, Herr Stefanetz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stefanetz. What you mentioned was the recovery plan. You say this is a unique chance or unique opportunity. We'll come back to this in our discussion. And now I would like to ask the minister, Mrs. Hummel. You said that the Free State Bavaria has close economic relationships with the countries in Central and Eastern Europe. What is the current status of these relations? So if you have a look, could you describe them, and maybe with a view to the future, how will they develop? What are important instruments? How you can develop bilateral relations with these countries? And what are your plans or topics for the future with the countries of Central and Eastern Europe? With many countries from Central and Eastern Europe, we have very intensive economic relationships. When you see the statistics, exports, imports, and economic relations, they are very strong partners for us, and especially the area of automotive industry. If you allow me to mention this, we have very close cooperation, and at the moment we're in the process of transformation. And at this point, it's indeed very important if the suppliers to automotive industry, these suppliers are at the moment come from Central and Eastern Europe, and we need to make sure how we can develop together. We need to say what it means when in the middle of July we get some rules from the EU. We all support climate protection. There's no question about that, but we need to make sure that on one side, we need to achieve our climate goals, but on the other side, the jobs, the industry needs to know how they should plan their production. And therefore, our contacts, our discussions are very important. And the Visegrad group was mentioned. And the climate protection is also an important topic for the 4 countries. The discussions which I've had so far were positive, but I also heard that they said that they need more time and need to have time for implementing these steps. But this was just one example, is the automotive industry, since we have very close cooperation, but obviously it concerns other areas as well. Digitalization, together with Prague, 5G. We want to have a common corridor between Munich and Prague. So there's a number of projects which we would like to implement together, and bilaterally we have some working groups or committees which discuss specific projects or memorandums or adopt memorandums of understanding. In the past weeks and months, we've met with many representatives, unfortunately online. I hope now we'll have a chance to meet them personally, and I'm sure that together we'll be able to make progress in these areas after Corona. Thank you very much. I'd like to bring a question from one participant, Olivia Wiśniewski. She's a guest professor. It's about fourth wave of COVID pandemic, and it was said in, and I would like to ask Mr. Miklos, the role of the local. He mentioned the local level, and what role could be played by the local level, and what role for local state governments, and what would be the role for national states, and are there any lessons within the European Union which we should discuss together? What are the lessons?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think there are lessons. Firstly, it is necessary to say that Slovakia is a very small country. It means all Slovakia has 5.4 million inhabitants, and despite of this small size, it is clear that it was not the best strategy to have the same conditions at the same time for the whole country, because the situation was different in different parts of the country. And for instance, to make lockdown for the whole country as it was done at the beginning of COVID was too costly and not very effective, which means first thing is differentiation of the policy and measures regarding the concrete situation in concrete regions and localities. Second lesson, I think, is that there is stronger confidence and trust to those who people know personally, which means also if you're speaking about testing, if you're speaking about vaccination, it is very reasonable and clever policy to involve more local and regional politicians who have more direct contact with the people. For instance, now we have problem that in part of Slovakia, especially eastern, southern part, the rate of vaccination is very low, which means the best strategy seems to be if people are not able to come to some of centers, regional centers for vaccination, to visit people by these mobile units to offer them in cooperation again with local and regional authorities to offer them these services on the ground. This is, I think, the most important lesson also for the future. And regarding the EU level or better and closer coordination on the European level, it is also clear because we have still borders. Of course, we have Schengen, but now borders have been again relatively closed, which means to have better coordination in imposing and preparing the necessary measures will be better. Very good example is this COVID passport, which we already have, fortunately, and which can work much better as if every country is doing it by itself. For the future, I think it will be very important also to help to offer assistance to these countries which have lower rate of vaccination, because, and not only in the European Union, I have to say. Very good example is Ukraine, but also other countries, because if we will have higher vaccination rate, but these countries will not have, it will be, the problem will be not solved finally. Which means COVID is very complex phenomenon, not only healthcare phenomena, it has also economic, social, psychological dimension, which means it is very, very complex phenomena which needs the solutions and coordination on the all levels.
Vielen Dank, Herr Miklos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miklos. I would like to point your attention to our chat. We have not only the function of answer, but also questions, and the colleague from Slovak booth is speaking on the English channel. Sorry, the colleague from on the English channel. The colleague speaks on the English channel. The interpreter on the English channel hears the Slovak.
Das weiß ich nicht. Vielleicht ist es das Beste. Ich spreche einfach weiter und höre weg. Tue einfach so, als wäre das Problem nicht da.
But the problem is for the English interpreter because they are disturbing. I will continue now. So I talked about the opinion poll, and I'd like to come back to what Mrs. Chefalvayova said. She also mentioned an opinion poll, and the result of this opinion poll was that the people in EU criticize the EU for its policies. And on the other side, Mrs. Chefalvayova, you came to the conclusion that Slovakia, as a small member state, benefited from the EU. For instance, common procurement of vaccines. Since the EU market is much better and much bigger, and it would be difficult for Slovakia to procure these vaccines separately. So now I would like to know, what is your view? What are the reasons for these differences between what we have and what the people think? What do you think is behind this? And what would you suggest? How to get this issue under control?
Well, I think there are several reasons. Sometimes we tend to be too much critical on ourselves as Slovaks, but also as Europeans, we tend to be very critical. So I think that mainly the slow vaccine rollout at the beginning, which was really slow, but then it picked up speed, and now we are vaccinated. The EU, the average, is about the same as other countries. We don't need to be ashamed of it. But we made it look like we were weak and we were doing badly. So even in national media, the coverage has been quite negative. And then it didn't become so positive or corrected when the trend was reversed or when it became better. So I think one of the reasons is that we tend to be very critical. Another reason is that many people, and now I'm speaking for Slovakia, but also in other member states, are very vulnerable to disinformation, as I pointed out also in my initial remarks. And we have been under quite a heavy attack from anti-vaxxers, from various groups that tried to undermine the efficiency of the EU, the role of the EU in the process, and they were quite successful in the public, as we can see in the opinion polls. Because the situation wasn't as bad, and the example of Slovakia shows it very clearly. We were sent at the beginning of the pandemic last year, and I don't know if it was March or April, we were sent a shipment of masks from China, but we paid for those masks. And due to disinformation campaigns that were targeted on Slovak citizens, people tended to believe that those masks were a gift from China. And on the other hand, we received quite a lot of help when it was necessary from our European counterparts, from our European partners, whether it was the neighboring states, when we had the highest rate of deaths in Slovakia from the whole world. We had medical equipment, we had medical staff coming in, we have had help from Italy, from other countries. And this was not so much emphasized as that one single shipment of some masks that we have received from China. And then perhaps a third reason with which I would like to conclude is that unfortunately, and I think it's quite a human thing to do, but it does not help the functioning of the EU versus nation states or member states, is that when something goes well, the politicians or the leaders of the countries tend to say that they did it well and it's thanks to them. And they tend to forget about the credit that we need to give the European Union or the European institutions. They tend to forget to praise the EU. And on the other hand, when something goes badly, we tend to criticize Brussels and tend to get rid of the responsibility, blaming it on the EU, on European institutions. So I think all of these three reasons combined have played in, and we need to do something about it, of course, but that will be very difficult. Politicians need to be more responsible in communication. The problem of disinformation is something that is really huge now, and we are clearly not well prepared to countering disinformation. It's a whole story of strategic communication that needs to be built up on nation states level and also on European level. So I think we have a lot of work to do in all of these areas.
Communication as an extremely important issue. Thank you very much for your explanations, Mrs. Cefalvajová. And now I have a question for Mr. Štefanec. It's no surprise that as an EU, the member of EU Parliament who works in the field of economy, you talked about the recovery plan. What are the possibilities which you see in this context for your country, for Slovakia? What projects should be implemented in Slovakia? And I'm also asking you, as someone who does not come from Slovakia, because we don't want a project which serve only for one EU member state, but we want a project which brings some added value, European added value. So is there this European added value in these projects which are to be implemented in Slovakia?
I do hope so, that there is the added value for the whole Europe. Therefore, European Commission, together with European Parliament, set up the instruction or recommendation to use at least 20% of this recovery package to digital technologies and 36% to green transition. So this guideline was the same for every country. Slovakia fulfilled these conditions, and Slovakia prepared on top of that projects for educational, changes and also for healthcare sector, which is in my view important. But now, as I mentioned before, the important challenge is how to implement it. This will be crucial part, how to implement these good ideas. And my remark would be that this huge package shouldn't be used only for infrastructure, but should be used primarily for reforms, for the changes. We have to use it for reforms of education, reforms of healthcare sector as well, in order to significantly improve the situation in educational sector at schools and also in our hospitals, because the current situation is not easy for the people. That's the situation as it is. But at the end, if this package is handled properly, I do believe that there is really a strong chance to bring this to added value, not only for Slovakia, but for the whole European economy, because we are on one boat. And at the end, as we know, we guarantee this package by our common European budget.
Vielen Dank. Jetzt ist es so, dass
Thank you very much. Now we're coming to the conclusion. We have almost 6 o'clock, and the next football game starts at 6. It was mentioned at the beginning, and at the very beginning, Mr. Wisniewski also mentioned. So maybe I'll start with the final round. Mrs. Hummel, Madam Minister, what will be the priorities of Bavaria in terms of EU policies, considering COVID pandemic? To suppress the COVID pandemic, what will you focus? Please be brief. What will be your priorities? To develop relationships also to our neighboring states, including Slovakia, Czech Republic. That means develop relationships. Secondly, we need to make sure what Green Deal and climate package, what can we do? What does it mean for our country? What does it mean for our economy? And what can we learn from the crisis? What can be learned from the pandemic? Also in relation to the capacity of the EU. Where do we need speedy decision so that we can handle a pandemic better? Also in order to keep or maintain the trust of people. Thank you very much, Mrs. Šefčovič. Imagine you are the Prime Minister in Slovakia, and you now are inviting the Bavarian Minister for EU Affairs. What would be the projects that Slovakia and Bavaria could implement together? What would you stress in the invitation?
I was just thinking about how a pity it was that while we were in national parliament, we didn't interact in perhaps bigger member states, regional levels or lower levels, because sometimes the discussions could have been very fruitful and brought in a lot. So as Madam Minister was talking about the extensive economic cooperation that we have, I'm sure that many projects can be driven and implemented and even further developed. But one thing that she also mentioned, and that I agree a lot, and which is an issue for Slovakia, again, in the relation to the Green Deal and to the green transition, Slovakia has been one of the first countries in the region to sign up for the EU decarbonization goals. But as of today, there is no study of impact that would have been carried out on Slovak businesses. So this is something that we need to work on. And Madam Minister mentioned it as well, that we need a green transition, we need a transition to low carbon economy, but we need to also be aware of how our economy is today. So I think that there is a lot that we could work on together in this issue.
Ja, jetzt, obwohl wir schon 18 Uhr haben, aber schnell die...
Even though it's 6 o'clock now, please, to Mr. Miklos, your think tank also deals with education. What are your views? What should Slovakia do better? Not only in relation to pandemic, also in relation to the EU.
Yeah, I see two priorities very briefly. First, it is speeding up reforms inside in the country to use recovery plan. Slovakian recovery plan is written very well, but very big challenge will be good implementation, especially political implementation of all these ambitious reforms, including reforms in education, where the situation is not very good, especially regarding quality of the higher education and also involvement of all children to the education process from the beginning. And second priority could be for Slovakia and for other countries as well to be responsible partner on the European level for strengthening and also speeding up strength and coordination capacity and efficiency of the European Union, especially in area like international affairs, like safety, like challenging global threats, China, and so on and so on.
Vielen Dank, Herr Stefanetz. Sie haben die
Thank you very much, Mr. Stefanetz. We talked about SMEs. What do SMEs need?
First of all, SMEs need to improve the access to capital, and also they have to remove administrative barriers on the single market. So we have to still fight versus bureaucracy. Therefore, we would like to implement at the European level the rule 1 in, 1 out, and to minimize administrative cost on SMEs. That's our ongoing support for small and medium entrepreneurs. And coming back to the first priority, to improve access to credit, it is now even more important because most of SMEs, they are in a very difficult economical situation. So we would like to help them by cooperation with European Investment Bank, with European Commission, and also by building capital market union, because to improve access to capital, it means also to build the systematic solution for the future in terms of capital market union. Thank you.
Haben Sie alle herzlichen Dank für
Thank you very much for your interesting contributions. This afternoon, I send regards to Munich, to Brussels, and to Bratislava. We wish you all the best, and we're looking forward to the continuation of our cooperation in future. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye. Thank you.